and thanks for your interest in our presentation. In making this DVD, Synergy Medical Group has given you the opportunity to learn a whole lot about Dr. Jerry Tennant and the reasons behind his remarkable success as a physician. We started this production by showing you a key interview he did on PBS. The interviewers gave him a great chance to tell about his unique approach to good health and healing. Now, in the last part, he talks about the different techniques he uses when he works with his patients in his clinic and the reasons he does what he does. Now, this is really worth watching. Dr. Tennant recently completed a great book called Healing is Voltage. Healing is Voltage is an absolute must for anyone who is serious about getting healthy and staying that way. It's a really useful resource for families. As you continue to pursue your journey to better health, you can get your own copy from Synergy Medical Group in Dallas, Texas, BioHealth Energy Systems in Canada, or from Amazon. Please look for the contact information we've given you at the end of the movie. Well, thank you for watching, and we really hope you learn from what we've done here.
Energy medicine is something we're very interested in here at Healing Quest.
Well, we like the fact that it can help us avoid things like pharmaceutical drugs and invasive surgery, and also give us more control over our own health.
And that's exactly the goal of a trailblazing physician you're about to meet.
Dr. Jerry Tennant doesn't look like a revolutionary until you hear what he has to say about a radically different approach to health and wellness. He's talking about energy medicine.
It empowers each of us to take control of our health and keep ourselves well.
For more than 30 years, Dr. Tennant was one of the nation's top eye surgeons. He holds numerous patents on surgical instruments and other medical devices, and he did much of the basic research into the laser that's now used in LASIK surgery. But in 1995, a bout with encephalitis left him unable to work and incapacitated for most of the day.
The best doctors I could find said, well, you have 3 viruses in your brain. We don't know what to do about it, so good luck. So I began to read cellular biology books to see if I could figure out how to make things work again.
Jerry Tennant's healing quest led him to conclude that his basic problem was a lack of voltage or energy at the cellular level.
If I didn't correct the energy of my body, I'd never get well because I couldn't make new cells. Chronic disease occurs when we lose the ability to make new cells at work. And one of the bases of making new cells is having enough voltage to do it.
Dr. Tennant was able to restore proper voltage to his cells and make a complete recovery, and that in turn led him to focus on energy medicine.
Energy medicine is the oldest form of medicine. The oldest medical books we have are 5,000 years old, and they speak of acupuncture in China and Ayurvedic medicine in Tibet. And of course, some younger books are from Egypt. And it recognizes that everything that happens in the universe is about energy.
One result of Dr. Tennant's research was a book called Healing is Voltage, describing his findings in detail. Another result was the development of a device to measure energy at the cellular level and add voltage where it's needed. The Biomodulator uses acupuncture meridians, which Dr. Tennant calls bioterminals, to deliver microcurrents to organs where the voltage is low.
What you're trying to do is to get electron transfer from the device down to the acupuncture wires under the skin.
The device has a number of attachments and has FDA acceptance for treating chronic, post-traumatic, or post-surgical pain. Success has also been reported in reversing macular degeneration. In Irving, Texas, Freda Benton says Dr. Tennant's energy medicine changed her life.
I was an environmental engineer for almost 20 years. Had my own environmental company, and which involved doing inspections on old buildings. Of course, obviously, you get into a lot of nasty situations and the other environmental chemicals or whatnot. And then in November of 2007, my husband and I had taken our 2 young boys to Carlsbad Cavern, and I began experiencing terrible headaches. I thought I had a sinus infection. The next morning I woke up and I couldn't see anything. I had lost all my vision entirely. I had 2 surgeries, 7 injections in my eye, for almost a year, and my sight just never returned. It was just continually getting worse. And so a friend of mine suggested that she take me to her doctor, Dr. Tennant. He began giving me treatment with the biomodulator and other energy. He explained his principle, which was basically that your body is a big battery and it needs to be charged. And it just made total sense to me after I started. And within a month, I was able to start seeing. And I've been able to see now, not as good as I did beforehand, but I mean, after all, I had 3 or 4 surgeries and 7 injections in my eyes. But at least I can now read and I can drive. And, I make my own websites, and I don't have any problems.
Maxie McFadden came to Dr. Tennant for help with healing a broken bone.
I broke my 5th metatarsal on my left foot. I twisted it and resulted in broken foot. And so I had the transducer and the biomodulator, and I was able to use that to help it heal. The first doctor that I saw wanted to do surgery and put a pin in or screw, and I didn't want to do that. So I was able to heal it just perfectly with the transducer and the biomodulator and the soreness oil, and I didn't have to take any pain medications.
Dr. Tennant's focus on cellular health has also led him to include a number of other elements in his approach to healing. One of those is nitric oxide.
We all understand that every cell needs oxygen to work. And in reality, a primary control of oxygen availability in the body is nitric oxide. But until just a few years ago, physicians had no way to measure it because it's a very fast disappearing gas, until Dr. Nathan Bryan at the Heart Institute in Houston developed a simple little dipstick thing that you can use to test it. Once you know that you're deficient, then Dr. Bryan has created a little tablet that's very much like a sweet tart, and you simply put it on your tongue and let it dissolve, and it will correct your nitric oxide levels.
Dr. Tennant says other critical ingredients for cellular health are humic and fulvic acids.
Now, fulvic has the role of controlling what goes into and out of cell membranes. So without humic and fulvic, our bodies don't work the way they're designed to work. Taking humic and fulvic solves all sorts of problems and gets us back to the way we were designed to work.
But he says not all humic fulvic supplements are created equal.
And the reason that I use Mother Earth Labs is that they are, as far as I can find, the only company that processes theirs in an FDA-certified laboratory or manufacturing facility, and they guarantee the parts per million.
Dr. Tennant says the water we drink is also a critical issue.
You want the water that you drink to be alkaline, which means it has electrons in it. Secondly, you want it to be clean, and that's harder to find because what we find is that most of our tap water contains all of the medications that all of our friends and neighbors are taking, and there are systems that will take those out, but it's not done by our city. Chlorine is another problem. Chlorine, like fluoride, is damaging to tissue. And finally, it has to do with cluster size. The larger the clusters are, the harder it is to get through cell membranes and into the cell. So if you have water that has microclusters in it, that is small clusters of these H2O things, then it can easily get into the cell. And indeed, the best water I can find is from systems made by a company called pH Prescription.
And he has some pointed opinions about improving health for all of us.
It's imperative that each person begin to take responsibility for themselves, and by simply making better, educated, informed choices on what we put into our bodies, namely in the way of food and water, and by having the ability to understand a different paradigm that we can measure the voltage in our body and determine which organs are beginning to have problems making new cells to repair themselves, we have the ability then to take control of our own future and our health at a very inexpensive way. with all of our resources, we should be the happiest, healthiest people on the planet, and we're not, but we could be.
As we said at the beginning of this report, Dr. Tennant is very serious about empowering everyone to take control of their own health.
Now, I understand that both the women you interviewed are using his approach to help their families.
Right. Both Freda and Maxie say they use the biomodulator as a first line of defense for everything from pulled muscles to more serious injuries. The basic unit cost about $2,500, but both of them told me it's the best investment they've ever made for not only themselves, but also for their families.
So how many biomodulators are in use now?
I think there's thousands, not only in the U.S., but also overseas. In fact, Freda Benton, who we met in Texas, has a nonprofit medical clinic built by a group called Just Us Friends. The clinic serves poor children in Tanzania, and she says the staff there uses the biomodulator to help with everything from bug bites to malaria.
If you want details on Dr. Tennant and his healing voltage approach, we have a link for you at www.healingquest.tv.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jerry Tennant, speaking to you from my office in Dallas, Texas.
I'm going to attempt to change your paradigm. Your paradigm is a set of things that you've learned throughout your life that you've come to believe is true. Changing one's paradigm is very difficult for most people. It's particularly hard for us physicians who have been so indoctrinated that we know how the body works and what is best for our patient, that if someone says that we don't know what we're talking about, we find it very difficult to change. The Western medical paradigm is that the body isn't functioning correctly, and it can only be sustained or corrected by finding a chemical or drug to sustain or correct it, or to remove the offending part surgically. This works best for acute illnesses like trauma. Doctors normally order a complete blood count, a urinalysis, and a complete metabolic profile as blood tests. If these labs come back normal, your symptoms are considered to be psychosomatic. A different way of thinking about the body is that we normally don't get well by correcting cells that are malfunctioning, but rather we get well by making new cells that function correctly. The rods and cones of the retina replace themselves every 48 hours. The brain replaces itself every 8 months. Making new cells requires all the raw materials necessary to make a good cell, plus the voltage to use those raw materials. Another part of the new paradigm is that all chronic disease, everything from allergies to diabetes to hypertension to ADHD to cancer, is caused by, or at least aggravated by, a fungus that is always present in the body waiting for the right conditions to have us for lunch. I'm going to attempt to change your paradigm about your health by giving you information from freshman medical school physiology, oriental medicine, and some new technologies. For you to believe me, you must have a sense of who I am and my training and background. First, I want to disclose my interests. I am the owner of patents pending for the device I developed called the Tennant Biomodulator. I'm also the owner of patents pending for the use of certain electromagnetic energies in the treatment of macular degeneration. Here is an image of the Tennant Biomodulator showing that it is approximately the size of a computer mouse. The FDA has evaluated the Tennant Biomodulator. It and certain accessory electrodes are FDA listed by its distributor or manufacturer in the categories of 21 CFR 882.5050 for biofeedback and 21 CFR 882.5850 as a transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulator for pain relief with intractable pain and postoperative pain. It has not been approved for other indications. The use of electronic measurements of acupuncture meridians to diagnose disease has not been approved by the FDA. This device is used as directed by a licensed health professional as permitted by your state and federal regulations.
I rarely talk about my achievements, but it seems prudent here to show that I am not someone who has a new agenda that is other than the advancement of healthcare. I have a long history of the advancement of traditional medicine in my field of ophthalmology. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school at age 16 by completing my junior and senior years simultaneously. I completed college except for 3 hours in 2.5 years. I received Phi Kappa Phi Award and the Pre-Med of the Year Award. I attended the University of Houston School of Optometry before going to medical school. I was accepted into Southwestern Medical School at age 19, and I graduated in the top 10 of my class at age 23. I did a residency in ophthalmology at Harvard Medical School and Mass Eye Hospital and Southwestern Medical School and Parkland Hospital between 1964 and 1968. I'm board certified in ophthalmology and in ophthalmic plastic surgery. I was the director of the Ophthalmic Plastic Surgery Clinic at Parkland Hospital, and I am the founder and director of the Dallas Eye Institute. I'm the holder of patents for medical devices, including intraocular lenses, surgical instruments, etc. I am the co-founder of the Outpatient Ophthalmic Surgery Society, and along with 2 of my colleagues, we taught most of the ophthalmologists how to do outpatient eye surgery in the 1980s. I was one of the first surgeons in the United States to place intraocular lenses into eyes after cataract surgery, and I taught those techniques around the world. I'm one of the few in the world who have received the Corboy Award for Advancements in Ophthalmology. I've also received the American Academy of Ophthalmology Award for contributions. I'm the author of books about cataract surgery and lifestyle management. I currently provide energetic medicine and integrative medicine in a private clinic setting. Information provided by me in this educational presentation is my personal view and is not the claims of any manufacturer or distributors of any devices. Some recommendations have not been evaluated by the FDA. I am not an officer or owner of the U.S. distributor of the Tennant Biomodulator. The distributor is Synergy Medical Group in Irving, Texas. Now let's look at my journey into integrative and energetic medicine. I practiced ophthalmology from 1964 to 1995. I did much of the FDA study for the company called Visex for their excimer laser. I did about 1,000 cases in the U.S. and about 2,000 cases abroad from 1991 to 1995. What we didn't know at the time is that the viruses that would be in the cells of the cornea could be released but not killed by the laser. The viruses would come up from the patient's eye and go through my mask and into my nose and into my brain. I thus developed neuropathies and encephalitis with a bleeding disorder and a low platelet count. And I had nervous system defects that lasted for about 7 years. I could see a patient and know what was wrong with them, but I couldn't remember how to write a prescription. Also, I developed spastic movements, which doesn't work really well if you're operating inside of somebody's eyeball. Thus, I had to quit work on November 30th of 1995. This is how I spent most of my time for the next approximately 7 years. I would sleep about 16 hours a day. I had 2 or 3 hours a day in which I could think clearly enough to understand a newspaper, and then just like a light switch, it would go off and I couldn't understand it anymore. So I was pretty worthless during this time. This photo shows a couple of interesting things. Remember that I had viruses in my brain and viruses in my spleen. Notice that these 2 Pomeranians, Tigger is the brown one, Tigger would lay on my head, and Pooh would lay against my spleen. Now that I've gotten well, they don't do this anymore. It appears that they recognized that I needed their electrons, and they were trying to assist me. I feel I owe my life to integrative medicine. I was told by my oncologist that I would develop Burkitt's lymphoma and that nothing could be done about the multiple viruses in my system. My blood profile suggested that I might die in the summer of 1999. The left picture shows how I looked at Christmas time in 1999 and the right one at Christmas time in 2005. As you can see in the left image, My hair was gray, but I used a dye. You could see sort of the sallow, jaundiced look that I had in the left picture. And hopefully you can tell that I look significantly better in the right picture in 2005. One of the reasons that I survived this period was my wife, Marilyn. She sustained me through those difficult years. In addition to caring for me, she was also caring for my invalid parents. She has always been the wind beneath my wings. My health has continued to improve since I discovered integrative and energetic medicine. So I'm here to teach you about the tools that saved my life when traditional medicine could not, and how you can use them in your practice and in your life. I had never heard of the concept of energetic medicine until I received these Polaroid pictures in the mail from my friend Janet. Janet was told by MD Anderson Cancer Clinic in Houston, after giving her chemotherapy and radiation, that nothing more could be done for the lymphomas that you can see around her neck in the left slide. She also had lymphomas, tumors in her left armpit, in her left kidney, and in her spleen. Rather than do nothing, Janet decided to go to Mexico and see if she could get some help. One evening, she and her husband were in a restaurant and met Dr. Robert Vance from Las Vegas. Dr. Vance immediately knew what was wrong with her and suggested that she could come see him in his clinic, as they were having great success with lymphoma. She told him she decided that she would continue with what she was doing at the present time. Soon the tumor around her neck was beginning to choke Janet to death, and she told her husband that if she lived through the night, that in the morning she wanted to go see Dr. Vance. That's when the left picture was taken in his office. The right picture was taken 3 weeks later when she was on her way back home. Janet told me that her tumors were mostly gone in about 4 days, but they treated her for 3 weeks. She was kind enough to give me copies of her medical records when she returned, where a new CAT scans and blood test shows that her tumors were completely gone. After my introduction to energetic medicine by Janet, I asked my wife to take me to Mexico to see how they did it, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of energetic medicine. Medicine, as practiced in the West, generally concerns itself with memorizing a set of symptoms and calling each set of symptoms a disease or a syndrome. We then look for drugs or surgery to get rid of those symptoms. However, medicine didn't begin that way. It began as a way to make cells work normally without introducing chemicals that do not exist in nature. To understand energetic medicine, one must understand a few electronic terms, particularly pH. pH stands for potential hydrogen and is generally taught to be a measure of acid-base balance. However, it's really much more than that. To measure pH, one can use any number of readily available pH probes. A pH probe acts like a battery that proportionally generates positive direct current voltage for low pH, nothing for a pH of 7, and negative voltages for high pH values. Basically, we are using a sophisticated voltmeter in order to measure pH. A solution has the possibility of having excess electrons and thus being an electron donor, or having a deficiency of electrons and thus being an electron stealer. In the system of pH, if the solution is an electron donor, we put a minus sign in front of the voltage. If the solution is an electron stealer, we put a plus sign in front of the voltage. Thus, pH runs from a voltage of plus 400 millivolts of electron stealer to minus 400 millivolts of electron donor. Once we've measured the voltage, we convert that to a logarithmic scale from 0 to 14. 0 corresponds to plus 400 millivolts, neutral of 7 corresponds to 0 millivolts, and minus 400 millivolts of electron donor corresponds to a pH of 14. One can use a pH strip to measure pH, whether you're measuring it in a swimming pool, measuring your saliva, measuring your urine, etc. These are indirect measurements of what's going on in the cells. Saliva is a measurement of what your body's trying to hold on to, or roughly what your cellular voltage is. And urine pH is a measure of what your body's trying to get rid of. If you are normal, both salivary and urine pH will be 6.5, and this corresponds to a cell pH of about 7.35. Don't be confused about there being plus and minus voltage in a solution, whereas in a copper wire or other conductive material, we don't talk about plus and minus. In a wire, we assume that there are electrons available, and so we just talk about, for example, there being 110 volts in the wire bringing voltage to our home. But in a solution, you have the possibility for it to be an electron donor or electron stealer, and thus you can have plus or minus voltage. There are examples of electron donors and electron stealers in things that we might use on a regular basis. For example, vinegar would be an electron stealer, whereas lye or Drano would be an electron donor. Thus, in discussing cellular voltage or pH, we're talking about an ionic solution. Thus, we see that voltage can change from having electrons available to do work, which we call electronegative or alkaline, to being electron deficient, which we call electropositive or acidic. Let's look at the following chart to see that the polarity can change from electronegative or alkaline to electropositive or acidic. You will see that it's much easier to think about voltage rather than to think about pH. Let's look at some synonyms. An electron stealer causes damage. It's a pH from 0 to 6.9. We call it acidic. So when we say that illness only occurs when the body is acidic, we're saying that illness occurs when the body has low voltage. A free radical is defined as a molecule that is missing electrons and is trying to steal some from any place it can find them. These obviously do damage. Electron stealers are the positive pole, they're destructive, and at the atomic level they spin left. Electron donors can do work. They're a pH from 7.1 to 14. They're also called alkaline. When we say that health occurs when your body is alkaline, we're saying that health occurs when your body has voltage. Electron donors are also called antioxidants. An antioxidant is something that has electrons available. Thus, when Mama says eat your veggies, they're good for you, she's saying eat your veggies because they contain electrons that can get rid of the free radicals that are damaging your cells. Electron donors are the negative pole, they're constructive, and at the atomic level they spin right. Cells are a lot like your car as far as they're needing to run within narrow range of specifications. For example, your car won't run very well if you put a 6-volt battery and kerosene in it. It requires a 12-volt battery and gasoline. In medical school, we're often taught to pay attention to glucose available to a cell, but we pay particular attention to high glucose and not so much to low glucose. As far as temperature is concerned, we also tend to pay attention to high temperature but not to low temperature. We pay attention to high blood pressure but rarely to low blood pressure. pH is rarely observed except in an intensive care unit setting, and the same is basically true for oxygen. However, cells are required to run in very narrow ranges of all of these, and if they're out of the ranges, you get the illnesses that you see here if the things are abnormally high or abnormally low. There are a lot of numbers on this slide, and you may wish to pause the DVD so that you can take a closer look. However, the point that I'm trying to make with this slide is this. Cells in adults are generally designed to run around a minus 20 millivolts, and of course minus means that there are electrons available to do work. When a cell needs to heal, it has to get up to minus 50 millivolts, so it has the horsepower to heal. Obviously, minus 50 has more electrons available than minus 20. Thus, one goes back to the operating voltage of a minus 20 and everything is fine. However, we began to get into trouble when voltage drops below the operating voltage of minus 20. At a minus 15 millivolts, we get tired. At a minus 10 millivolts, we get sick. At a minus 5, the organs begin to malfunction. And if we go past 0, it's like putting a flashlight battery in backwards. It just doesn't work. As voltage drops, we get pain, we get decreased oxygen, and we begin to get infections, first viral, then bacterial, then fungal. And at plus 30 millivolts, we get cancer. As you can see, most all of chronic disease is associated with a loss of voltage. We also began to see that pain, chronic pain, is simply a symptom of low voltage. Also, as oxygen drops, we began to switch from oxygen available metabolism to oxygen unavailable metabolism, which is very inefficient. Thus, we began to have trouble maintaining our metabolism as we lose our ATP. Notice that as voltage drops, we also began to get infections. When we have infections, these microorganisms want to have lunch. The way they have lunch is to put out what are for them digestive enzymes to dissolve our cells so they can eat us. Of course, when they're in the process of damaging our cells or dissolving our cells, we perceive that as a toxin that is harmful to our body. So infections are a symptom of low voltage. When you get your mind around what I've just discussed, you'll begin to think of illness in a different way. Voltage controls whether or not we have enough energy in our cells for them to work, whether or not we have pain, whether or not there's adequate oxygen in the cells to function normally, whether or not we have infections, and whether or not we eventually develop cancer. Now let's look at an example of how this works. My thumb is running at minus 20 millivolts. Now I hit it with a hammer. Immediately the voltage goes to minus 50 millivolts in an effort to begin to repair the cells that I damaged with the hammer. At a minus 50 millivolts, my thumb is inflamed, which means it's red, it's hot, it hurts, it pulses, and it doesn't work very well because it's swollen up. Now, when my thumb is in the situation of minus 50 millivolts, it has two possibilities. One is that if it has enough electrons available to repair all of the cells that were damaged, then the thumb will go back to being normal at a minus 20 millivolts. However, there's another possibility. Let's assume that my thumb ran out of electrons before it could make new cells to replace the damaged ones. Then the voltage drops down below minus 20 millivolts and my thumb becomes chronically degenerative. Instead of being pink, it's pale, and now it hurts all the time. The pain of chronic low voltage is not the same as the pain of minus 50 millivolts. The pain of minus 50 millivolts is a throbbing, a pulsing red type of pain, whereas chronic pain is just a chronic pain. The problem is when you're down at minus 50 millivolts, nothing you do will work until you put in enough electrons to push you back up to minus 50 millivolts so that you can begin to make normal new cells. Remember, at minus 50 millivolts, it will feel as if you just hit it with a hammer. You always have to go through this healing process. Remember also that as voltage drops, infections begin. And so the voltage that's present determines what sort of infections can happen and where you are with the toxicities that they put out in their efforts to have lunch with you as the primary meal. Thus, an obvious question that we must ask is, what is my voltage? Or another question is, why did my voltage drop enough to allow me to get sick? Well, you can measure your voltage with a simple voltmeter that measures in millivolts. However, the problem with that is that because the voltage pulses in the body, the number is constantly changing and it's hard to get an endpoint. There are a variety of computerized devices that are designed to measure the voltage in the body. Since 1951, the most common way of measuring voltage in organs has been to use impedance to measure through the acupuncture meridians. The acupuncture meridians are simply the fascial planes of the body, or they serve as fibrous wires. In the body, fibrous tissue serves two functions. It serves as structural strength, but it also serves to move electrons from place to place. In the diagram here, you will see a diagram of the lung and large intestine meridians And then in the cross-section of the arm, you can see the actual fibrous wires or fascial planes that are carrying voltage from place to place. By simply tapping into these, we can measure the voltage in the deep organs such as the long and large intestine. In your home, you have a circuit breaker box in the garage, and then you have a circuit that would go to, say, your refrigerator, a lamp, and a wall switch, and a different circuit goes to, say, the TV, and a different lamp and a different wall switch. Well, we have exactly the same system in the body. For example, the acupuncture meridian that we call the lung meridian also takes voltage to the nose, the skin, the large intestine, the shoulder, and the back. The acupuncture meridian or circuit that we call the stomach circuit